talk about today how I went from my first single family property that I bought here in Laramie and what it looks like to buy that one, and then what it looks like today, to where today we just closed a couple months ago, June 30th, on a 72 unit building. We own 63 of them. And yeah, that like doubled our portfolio to where we're managing around 140 to 150 units. Need to keep starting to figure out if you're counting the flips and some of the stuff that you're planning to move pretty quick. I want to show you guys like what it's like to operate there and what it's like to get up and scale and operate at 150 plus, right? And what that looks like. And now really, we're going to break it into 3 separate parts. It's going to be from finding the deals, how are you finding them, sourcing them, to how are you funding them, what that looks like, and then last of all, how are you fixing them up and maintaining them, right? So I want to explain all those 3 things along the journey. So to kick it off, talk about how do you find the deal, right? So you guys probably all experience this, but when you're first starting out, if you're looking for the first house, you can be what they call like bird dogging, you can be driving for dollars, you can be working with another easy, great one is working with an agent. Find an agent who knows the market. That's probably where I definitely would have somebody start if they're trying to find the first property, is find an agent who knows the property, get to know them, have them help you find the property, right? Or word of mouth or just friends, right? So like my first property, I actually bought it, my roommate's dad owned the house and he was selling it, and I decided that I wanted to buy it and have my dad co-sign with me. That's how I found and bought my first deal. But as you grow, and if you want to do more than 1 or 2 a year, or maybe 3 or 4 a year, you got to figure out how are you going to source more deals, right? How are you going to find them, especially in today's market, or in a market like here in Laramie, where anything that goes on the market probably isn't going to work. The numbers aren't going to work for most investors, right? But that is maybe shifting based on interest rates. But another thing though, I would say kind of taking that next step is, again, I think finding the right agent can still help you find like off-market pocket listings, right? So you can do that way. But then as you start to transition into doing more volume, that's when you got to go either find a wholesaler or start to go direct to seller, because otherwise you're just not going to find and make the numbers work. And that's kind of how we evolved. That was around 4 years ago. That's when we created Wyohouses, because we wanted to find a way, how do we go direct to seller? And how do we get, and it's been really awesome how it evolved, because I remember when, again, I was like talking to people like Tyler, got a hold of him. I was just trying to have like interns call. We were basically calling all the units that were listed for rent on Zillow. We're like, hey, if they're listed for rent and they're not rented in Laramie, something's wrong. So maybe they're motivated sellers, right? So I remember just trying to get on calls and talking to different people. I remember talking to like Stephen Pence had some properties, and I was just trying to get on appointments and calls, to where now we do so much marketing with cold calling, with text messages, with postcards, with, or some other ones, radio, Facebook, and even just like SEO, or another one is pay per lead. You can go to websites and just pay per lead. Like one of the nice things about Wyoming is it's one of the cheapest pay per lead states, just based on volume. So a lot of other investors I talk to across the country, they can't make pay per lead work because they're paying $200, $300 per lead, and a lot of these leads are not any good, right? But the beauty of where we buy them is I can buy them at like $100 a lead, and I could go through quite a few. I mean, if you just look at the math, say I want to make at least 10,000 on there, I could basically buy, even if I'm like convert 1 out of 10, I'm still at a pretty good ratio, right? And I think it's like 1 out of 100 I would actually have to close. So anyway, those are different marketing channels, to where today, now I love it now, because now I have a cold callers and texters that are generating leads, and then I turn on the marketing for like the direct mail and the Facebook. That's just kind of evergreen going. But now, and then I have a lead manager who takes all those appointments and they qualify and figure out, hey, is this an actually motivated seller? And then she books me with appointments. So now it's awesome. That's really exciting and fun part of my job now, is now I get to have all those like 3 to 4 appointments per day with somebody who's got some sort of motivation, right? And we've just, another, I guess, way we've grown is now, and a lot of other investors, right? So they can get a lot of leads, but if they can't buy it at 70 cents on the dollar, or maybe right now you want to buy it 50 cents on the dollar, they can't make it work, right? So there's a lot of leads that just don't work. But because we do so many creative strategies, because we have good relationships like that, like with Derek, there's a lot of these leads that, hey, if it's not a cash wholesale deal, maybe it's a creative finance deal where I can assume their loan, or maybe it's a novation where I can get it under contract and make some repairs and use an agent and go get it sold. So that's kind of the beauty of what we've created with our marketing machine, to where now we've got the properties, or we've got the leads coming in. I can figure out, hey, what's the best route for this? Do I want to fix and flip this myself? Do I want to go sell this to Seth and make a small fee and let Seth go flip it and make some money on it? Or do I just want to hold it for my rental portfolio? Or is it a seller finance one that I can take in? Or the last one is, I'll talk about later, we're getting some of these seller finance ones and we're getting great terms. We're basically turning around and wrapping that to an investor to where they can get the good terms. terms, and I can make a little bit of revenue for our company, pay for our overhead and marketing, and then they can get into a great deal at a phenomenal interest rate. So I got some cool examples of that later on. So that's kind of in a nutshell of the finding the deal, right? So again, from the base level, finding the first property, to really scaling to like where we're at, and we're trying to get like, I'm trying to think of the volume. I haven't run our volume for this year, but we're trying to do 50 to 100 transactions per year, from like, whether that's a wholesale, a fix and flip, a rental I keep, or a wrap that I wrap to another investor, or a novation. Are you guys familiar with novations? Yeah, so a novation is where I talk to the seller and say, hey, I can get you close to market value, and if we agree upon a number that works for you, but it's might be 85, 90% of ARV, but I just need your permission to list the property. Like, I'm gonna sell the property. Let me go find my end buyer and give me 60 days to sell this. And the other big pitch is, I'm like, hey, they're gonna need repairs, right? Everybody's having to do repairs in this market, right? So I'm like, hey, I've got guys in-house that can do the repairs. So let's agree upon a price. If that works for you, I get to keep everything above it. I'm gonna pay for the marketing. I'm gonna pay the agent fees. I'm gonna pay for all the repairs, but you get that number. Yeah, the pitch works pretty good because they get more money out of it. They don't have to sell at a discount, because essentially we're gonna double close it, or sometimes we'll just do an assignment, but it's just all up front with the seller. And they could basically sell for retail, but they get locked in at a certain price. Works good for the people who just don't want to deal with the agent, don't want to deal with the repairs. They just want to know, hey, how much am I gonna get? Well, we'll typically, I mean, in the perfect scenario, we'll pay that out at closing. Like if I gotta go replace a roof or do a foundation or plumbing, we'll just pay them off at closing, and I don't even have to come out of pocket. But yeah, I've got some risk to where they could completely back out. But again, I mean, I've got a purchase contract. We've played around with it where if it's a bigger one, we might, well, I'll say this, we've also done the same strategy where I actually close on it, they transfer the deed, and then we have an agreement that when I go to sell it, they get X. They basically get paid when I get paid. So that one protects me to where now, and I give them a mortgage. It's basically like a short-term seller finance. You can go file a lien. We could file a contractor's lien on the property, which would be probably the smoother, easier way. I mean, I've definitely had a lot of the conversations where if I'm gonna go put a lot of money into this, how am I protected? That's why I try to just transfer the deed. It's like, hey, if it's a significant amount of money, I just wanna be protected, and like, let's transfer the deed. We're doing the same thing. They've got a set amount, and then they get paid when. And now the other one I'll do there is I'll give them a down payment. I'll be like, hey, let me give you $5,000 down now so you know I'm serious, and deed transfers, I'm the owner, and you're gonna get the remaining $50,000 of your equity when we sell it. But that's been ways to kind of build, especially in this unvolatile market, that's the way we've been able to do deals. So cool, any other questions on that's kind of the finding the deal phase, right? From 0 to 1. So next piece is financing. So how do you finance a deal? Which we were having some conversations about that earlier about, hey, how are you gonna do that? So again, deal one, give you an example. The way I did it was, I was a college kid. Luckily, fortunately, I had my dad who would co-sign with me. At that point, I think we used an FHA loan and put about 10% down. I remember it was like $10,000. It was back in 2011, and I bought a house over there on Park, 1506 Park, for $150,000. So that one, yeah, just reappraised and refinanced it for $360, I think, not too long ago. Derek helped me with the comps. Exactly. So that's a great way to finance your first one, right? Is 100% either go house hack, which you guys probably know, and essentially that's what I was doing. I was house hacking. I bought the house, had a bunch of roommates. They were paying the rent. I was living for free, and that's how a lot of people get started. And honestly, there's not a better way to get started than just go house hack, go get a loan. I guess the only thing is if you can't qualify, if you don't have a W-2 job, find somebody to co-sign with you, or find another way. That's another way to get in, right? So that's kind of the first one, right? But then as you start going, you can go get that second property typically, right? I'm sure a lot of you guys have been here where, okay, I'm gonna go buy the second one. Then you might be able to still go and get conventional financing like a second home, or still get like 30-year fixed mortgages. But then again, nowadays, there's not even as much value in that because the interest rates are so high. But I would say the next phase is you can go from 2 to 3 to 4. Again, once you start to get to 4 mortgages, that's when I found it got really complicated and it wasn't even worth going through a conventional loan. That's when you got to make the next phase and go start talking to commercial banks. And if you're not doing that and you're in the phase of 1 to 2 right now, I would start talking to the commercial banks right away, right? I know Tyler, and I'm sure Derek, you guys have done this too. If you build those relationships, start them early, because those guys are going to help you scale. And the sooner you start doing deals with those guys, showing them you could perform, it's much more relationship based. So you got to make those connections right right away, get to know those guys, be putting deals in front of them. And even, yeah, you know what, I would honestly advise people that even if you could go get a 30-year fixed, or you could go work with this smaller banker and build a relationship and pay a higher rate, I'd probably compromise the rate just to go build a relationship. So then as you start to scale from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, now you want to go get bigger. That's when you got to probably start bringing in some private money or partners, right? So the way we've kind of evolved is having a W-2 helps a ton, right? Like if you can keep your W-2, again, I know Tyler did that. He was like me, we kept our W-2 as long as we could and built up as many assets as we could while we had our W-2. And those, again, whether it's a mortgage company or those commercial banks, you would think that some people think once you go to like more of a commercial loan, smaller bank, that they care less about your W-2, but those guys care just as much. That's what they want. They want to see the same thing, right? They love that W-2. So keep building on that. And then, yeah, then you can either like build up enough assets that way to where you can keep borrowing, because eventually you're going to hit a limit, right? Even with these small banks. That's another thing we were talking about earlier, right? Is once you get so many million with a bank or wherever that threshold is, they're going to cut you off, right? Then you either got to go refinance or go find another bank. Or, so one thing we've done that's helped us scale is build relationships with a bunch of them. That's another thing I brought up earlier as we're talking. I put all my financials in a packet, and when I send them out and I'm going to have people pull credit, I'm going to send it out to like 5 or 6 different small banks, see what their terms are. And that way I've got 4 or 5 different people looking at deals. And that's just allowed me to build relationships with multiple small banks, because there's going to be some that are going to say no. But I've never been a proponent of like, hey, just go all in with one guy, you should definitely build a strong relationship, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. So as you start to kind of plant a bunch of seeds, create relationships with these small banks, then you can start to grow and scale, but eventually you're going to need more equity, right? So the way we've done it is bringing in partners or private money. So a lot of people the partnership route is maybe a little bit simpler, where you just bring in a partner who's got capital. That's probably more the conventional route. We've done less of that. I've done more of like, let's go utilize my current assets and go find private money lenders. And like I've done a lot where like, let's go take a second lien on a property that has equity, that's cash flowing. Let's take a second lien on that, pull out $50,000 or $100,000 and give a private money investor. So say, I know Seth, he's a friend of mine. He knows who I am. I say, hey Seth, why don't you lend me $100,000? I'm going to give you this property I own that has $150,000 of equity. So there's still $50,000 a cushion, but I like to push it up higher, right? If it's a cash flowing asset, I've found that our private money lenders will go up to maybe 90%, because A, they know me, B, they know that it's a cash flowing asset. I mean, one guy once told me, he goes, man, I see how cash flow you got on this thing, and I know you're not gonna let that go. And if I do let it go, essentially they're protected, right? He could buy out that first mortgage and take over that property. All right, so that's a great way that I found to where I could continue to grow and buy properties, but not have to go give up 50% equity, right? It was through private money. Typically, yeah, between 10 to 12%, actually say 10 to 13% was a range I've always seen to those guys. And I would do it for 12, 24 months, simple interest. Yep, interest only payments typically, or some of them, they just load up the interest on the back end. Yeah, I've had some people just defer it. Yeah, I've just been very upfront with the guys too. Like, hey, this is the plan. This is what I'm doing. It's basically you're providing me working capital to go buy more properties, and let's set 12 or 24 months. But I've also learned that, hey, this is a timing thing, right? We might get in 12 months and it might be in the middle of several deals. We got to have some flexibility. Like you can't just come to me or I might have to come to you after 9 months and say, hey, we're in the middle of a bunch of deals. We're gonna have to go a little bit longer. So fortunately, I've had flexible private money lenders that understood that, and there's been times where I had to extend, right? But it's also been, I don't know. Those are other things where you start planting those seeds with those guys. You plant the seeds with the small banks, and you start planting seeds with these private money guys. Because probably one big takeaway I've learned in the last 9 months is we try to go raise a big fund, right? Because we want to bring in a bunch of limited partners with capital and go buy a bunch of property and be able to basically just go buy our single family or multifamily properties with a fund structure. But what I found is there's not a whole lot of people, unless you've been doing a bunch of funds, that want to go tie up their money for 5 years, right? Based on, they might like, the numbers might pencil, but I just found personally, it's hard to get a lot of people on board with that. So what I found is more effective is doing these smaller promissory notes, having a guy that's invested for 3 years now with me, and I've paid him interest payments, and we've gotten in and out of a couple deals. Now I go tell that guy, hey, he's now interested in doing a fund because he's been with me, right? He's got a track record. And that's worked well. And then obviously the other, maybe not so obvious, but I've been talking about like second liens with private money. Obviously first liens with private money are great. That's the simplest, easiest, most robust way to buy property. As you go, I go to Seth again, let's say, or this time I'm going to Derek. Derek's got a little bit deeper pockets. He can fund a $300,000 deal, and I go have Derek fund my house that I buy for $200,000, and I put $50,000 of rehab in, and Derek funds $250,000, and he's in first lien position, right? That's the most protected, best way to lend out your money. But what I found is my network, I've got less people that can take a whole deal down, which is because again, in Laramie, if you're buying something, you're probably spending $250,000 to $300,000 by the time you fix it up, right? So I found I've got less people that have that type of capital, more people that have got 50 to 100. So that's why I put them in second position and done them like on a one-off property. Typically debt. Yeah, typically just interest. Yeah. So it's really like a hard money lender, but without points. And that's the one big thing too I'd encourage people to do. Like you can go find hard money lenders, but I did that. We were in Dallas-Fort Worth like about 4 or 5 years ago. We were actually combining private money with hard money to take deals down and grow and doing the burst strategy. And it worked good early on, but then we went into a batch of bad contractors and then the seasonality kind of got us and it was not pretty. We got out of it. Luckily, we got everybody paid off and got out of those houses, lost a lot of money. But I learned like hard money is tough because you guys haven't ever done hard money. The draws kill you. Like you've got this big rehab budget, but they won't give it to you until it's done. And even when it is done, they're still like tightwadding it and it's so frustrating. And so you end up just floating the whole thing. And now you're floating 5 different projects that you've got all this rehab money tied up, they won't give to you. So that's why I haven't loved hard money. Plus you pay all the points up front. They want 1 or 2 or 3 points. My thing is go find private money lenders that know you, put them in first or second position and just give them interest. And it's much more favorable to you. Or you can be like Tyler and lend it out at like 15, 16, 20% now? Some of them? Yeah. Loan shark, yep. So the last phase is now you're ready to go take down. So this last deal we took down was $3.2 million purchase price plus $550,000 of rehab. Sorry, 63 units of a 72 unit building. Took it all down. And then I'm going to these small banks that I've been working with forever. They've been seeing me do deals. I'm like, hey, look at this deal. This deal is crazy. I'm buying these at $60,000 a unit, purchase price plus rehab, $60,000. They're gonna rent for $1,000 a month. Like this is a home run. But they're like, oh, that sounds risky. That sounds like speculation. I'm like, get out of here. But so what I had to do at that point though, is even though I felt like I had the track record, I had the financials, I still didn't have the financial backing to take down a $3.8 million loan. So that's when I had to bring in an equity partner or do like what Tyler did. So what I've learned is 2 strategies. What I did is I actually brought in a 50-50 partner. I was able to bring in, we both brought in the equity and then he was able to co-sign on the loan. I mean, that's the biggest thing, I'll tell you guys, when you get to that level is the banks are gonna want somebody else to sign with a bigger balance sheet. So you can either, you're gonna have to find somebody to co-sign with you and they're typically gonna want equity. So one way is the way I did it where I put in 50%, he put in 50%. And actually the cool part about my 50% is I was actually able to go get second liens on other properties that had equity and pay them. I was like, hey, I'm gonna refinance this big asset. I'm gonna refinance in 18 months because it's a perfect burst strategy. So why don't you give me a 12 to 18 month loan for $350,000 say at 12%. And I just split off a couple different properties with like 3 or 4 guys. So that's how I brought my equity in. And then my partner brought in his $350, and then we also had some other credit lines we used, and that's how we took down the 63 unit. And we're just straight 50-50 partnership, and I get a fee because I'm the president and do all the property management. So that's why we set up that one. But I really like what Tyler's done, and I just would have loved to do what he did. I just didn't have that right connection. What Tyler's done is that same deal, he would have that guy would have co-signed on it. Sound like they would usually bring most of the equity, and he buys them out on the refinance. He actually gives them all their money back, and he's got a good rate, like typically around 6%, pays them around 6% in the meantime until the refinance. But when he refinances, then he gives him back, he keeps 19% equity on it, which is a good deal, right? Versus mine, I'm always gonna be 50-50 with my guy, it still works. But I would love to be in that scenario where when I refinance, I'm at 81%, my partner's at 19%. Which is a really cool strategy they've done. But you gotta have the right contacts and the right people to take down that deal. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. From using mortgages, conventional mortgages from the start to recap, to starting to work with small banks, creating those relationships, to working bigger loans to where you gotta get another sponsor or a co-signer, take down the big deals. And then I'd say the last thing is using a fund. And that's where I think a lot of people wanna get to, but a fund is a whole nother job in itself, and there's a lot to that. That's eventually where we wanna go. We've already got the documents to create our fund, but we've kind of pumped the brakes on that for now. And we'd rather build more relationships with people doing more of these one-off loans, turning their money, returning their capital to where now they see what our company's doing. They're bought in on a 5-year vision of a fund. Cool, so that's the financing piece. Last, the fixing, right? So when you go buy your first property, probably all of us did this, we did the repairs ourselves, right? My first property, I fixed it up, I did all the maintenance, and some of us are still doing it, and there's nothing wrong with it, really. But to really scale, that's when you gotta start to source it out. So I bought my first one in Laramie. The second one was basically a house hack or a live-in flip that me and my wife did, and we did all the work on it. And luckily, my father-in-law is really handy, he helped me. Some of the things I think he just wanted to torture me, like the drywall. This is the most painful thing is, I spent like 3 weeks floating drywall and sanding building it and floating it down in the basement, and finally got it done. Literally the day my second son was born, I was down there floating, and my wife's like, we got to go to the hospital. I'm like, can I just finish this? You're like, do you really want to go sit in that hospital for like 6 more hours? Or can I just finish this and you can be comfortable here? Or you're not gonna be comfortable either way. But anyway, so we still get yelled at for that. But thing is, so we finished the house, we're all done. We installed the shower, it was like a glass shower deal, and we didn't reinforce it right from the backside of the wall. We're like, oh crap, we gotta cut in. All this finished drywall, we gotta cut in and patch it and put in something so you could back in and screw to it. And so we had to call a drywall guy, and we did, and we paid him like $300, and he came over there and he cut that out, put the board in there, put a piece in there, floated it, sanded it, repainted it in like 3 hours. I'm like, holy shit. I spent 3 months, right? So you learn all the trades, which is great, really helps you down the road. That's why I'm thankful. I learned a lot of those skills to where now I can hold people accountable and not get, I could at least know when people are bullshitting me and call people out on pricing, right? So I'd say, so again, early on, do it yourself. And if that's your skill set and that's what you love, there's a ton of contractors that that's what they do for a living and they invest. And I think that's a great way to do it. The way we've scaled is, first off, I was just trying to find third-party or contractors, right? And GCs, which I think a lot of people have done. But I've just struggled for years in Laramie, finding general contractors, going through dealing with headaches, dealing with quality control, dealing with just all the headaches that go with managing contractors. So I finally, was it about 2 or 3 years ago, I finally was like, I need to find somebody in-house. And at least I had a big enough portfolio and enough properties and projects going, I felt like I could support a full-time guy. So I actually brought a guy out of California, came up here, worked full-time, ended up losing him, hired another guy, which is Edward. So Edward's now our full-time guy here. But I've now built out to where we've got a full-time project manager, or full-time, we call it a Revive. So Revive is our new construction company. It's under our LLC umbrellas. So now we can do our own work and we can manage our own fix and flips. We can do our own property maintenance. And we're also working on doing retail work, which my goal is to actually have them do enough work for like retail customers that want to go remodel a bathroom or replace flooring or do whatever, or handyman work. I want to keep those guys busy enough to where they can actually fund my overhead of my crews. And then obviously I've got a crew now to go fix and flip. And I'll tell you what, the fix and flip with a crew is a complete game changer, because you're just looking at my numbers and I'm looking at what other people can pay. And I'm even looking at like these novations and I'm like, man, that's a tight window. But if you got guys that can come in there and turn things quick, it just opens up the deals you can take down a ton. So we've actually built out a crew in Laramie, one in Cheyenne, he's a third-party guy in Cheyenne. And we've got a crew now in Casper, full-time crew, and then a crew in Sheridan. And we're looking to build one in Billings eventually. So that's how really we've gone from the first one to 4 to 5 to now we've got a big enough portfolio to where we've got in-house guys. Yeah, it's still a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Me and Clint, I think second guess ourselves every day. Should we just be third party and just dealing with contractors? Or should we be dealing with all this overhead and managing these guys and making sure they're effective? It's a battle, no joke. But the long-term vision is we do have those. We've got different crews, and again, we can do the retail work and all of it. So that's kind of the fixing up in a nutshell. Cool, so to wrap up kind of those 3 things, you could do all 3, right? Like as I've kind of gone through, some people want to do all 3, want to do the finding the deal, want to fund the deal, want to fix it up, right? But some of you guys might find that, hey, I really like managing contractors, and I've got a construction company. Just go utilize a wholesaler or a company like us that can go find the deal. Like, hey, because obviously we sell to a lot of construction guys. Actually, probably our #1 buyer in Cheyenne is our contractor, because he likes taking on fix and flips, right? So that's one piece, right? You might be good at that. Or might be like Derek, that they can buy and sell stuff, they can find deals, right? But he might need help with the construction piece, or he might need a partner that he's got to go to take down more deals, right? So you don't have to have all 3, right? You could partner up, find those other pieces, or you can just third party the other pieces, right? But then kind of the last component is this is kind of the last thing I want to talk about, is the turnkey model. And that's that example I talked about you later. So you can also go turnkey. If you don't want to take the time to learn one of those 3 things, just go buy turnkey. And what turnkey means is you're going and buying a rental property that is already fixed up, or it's going to be fixed up for you, and they're helping you find the deal, right? They're sourcing and finding the deal. Before I get to the funding the deal, property management piece, right? When you go buy turnkey, you want to have a management company in place. So you can literally, if you've got good active income or you've saved up some money and want to get into real estate, you can just go deploy your money immediately and start cash flowing day one. Because like us, probably a lot of us have fixed up our stuff. We've bought our stuff in distress, fixed it up, waited for that cash flow, finally got the tenant or did the BRRRR strategy, and maybe it took us 12 months before we started making making income, right? But on turnkey, if you got the capital saved, you can go and buy it, you're cash flowing day one. That's the beauty of it. But the cool thing that we're adding in now into the turnkey model is the financing piece. So typically we would make a referral of like, hey, go use this lender or use this small bank, or that's who you should go to go fund your deal, or use cash. But now it's been awesome. We've done 2 different deals like this where we actually went and we got the terms. So we bought the house on terms. So I'll give you an example. House in Douglas, we bought on terms. We assumed a $145,000 mortgage at 2.75%, which is awesome. So the payment's like $825 a month. So we assumed those terms. So they're great terms for me, but I'm like, hey, why don't I turnkey that? So it's really cool. So what I did is I sold it to the turnkey buyer for $185,000, which is basically market value. So the delta there was $145,000 and $185,000, so $40,000. So all he had to do was bring $40,000 of a down payment to the property. That's all he did bring. He didn't have to go get a loan. He didn't have to go borrow at 8%. He's assuming a loan at 2.75, and he put $40,000 down. And what I did, because I'm actually not a broker, I can't manage property, I'm actually subleasing it from him. We have a separate agreement that, hey, I'm subleasing it for $1,400 from him, and I'm turning around and renting it for $1,600, $1,700. So I'll make a little spread there. But I can give him that kind of turnkey product. He doesn't have to worry about it. He actually lives in Chicago, so he's never seen the property, and we set this all up. So it's a really cool, unique situation where it's truly turnkey. Like, all he did is wire the funds to me, sign all the we actually set it up as a contract for deed on this situation because I wanted to protect that seller. Because when I tell that seller that because they're like, hey, well, what if you don't pay my loan? What happens? It's on my credit still. It's like, hey, like, we're a professional company. We're not gonna just walk away from this, right? But I don't know necessarily my third party guy if I can, I mean, seems like he'll be good. But that's why I set it up as a contract for deed, to where if my end buyer, my wrap buyer, my turnkey buyer defaults or disappears or something happens to him, I can step in and basically take over the payments and take it back. I haven't done this yet. I've been meaning this on my list to find a due on sale insurance company, right? I've heard they take about 1% of the loan amount. So on that one, I'd pay what, $1,400 to go get due on sale insurance. And my understanding is basically if the due note gets called, they'll just refinance it, or they'll pay, either way, they'll pay off that loan or fix it, and you get to keep, you're still there, right? As my attorney was drafting the docs for this last one, he's always reminding me, I'm like, I know, I understand it. There are some mitigations, but he goes, hey, I just had somebody call one in Helena. It was a Wells Fargo one. But I think they had, like, the person had passed away. Yeah, it's always something that triggers it. Or, yeah, and it was Wells Fargo, exactly. But you might see, back to the point Tyler made earlier about these banks, like he talked about First Interstate refinancing him. He's like, they're actually losing money on those at 2.75%. Granted, I don't think some of these big banks really care. But I am curious if more will be called because of the fact if interest rates are at 7, 8% and they find a note but I still don't know if they will, honestly. So let's say they call it due, right? And first off, I tell people, like, people do that all the time, what Seth's saying. They'll transfer it to an LLC, but nobody's that spooked about that. But essentially, if it happens, or say it does happen and it's not you, it's an actually sale from Derek to Seth, well, then you guys can write it in a contract. If that happens, deed goes back to him, and then you set up either a contract for deed or a lease purchase or some other type of agreement that still works. So that's where I have several different ways to mitigate it, but it is a risk. We've got it. My attorney made me put it in big. I'll let you run, man. We did it with this same guy, did 2 different properties. Yeah, it was basically like, in a ton of masterminds that are wrapping to end buyers, I found that there's less people in Wyoming. Like, a lot of these people, unlike in like sub 2 and PACE mortgage program, they're wrapping to end buyers, people that have a lot of cash but can't qualify for a loan. They're wrapping a ton of deals to those people, and they're actually living in it. But I found in Wyoming, I don't know if you've had the same experience, there's not a bunch of people that I feel like all the home buyers here are all utilizing the 0% or low money down, right? There's not a lot of people, I don't know. Are you seeing more people that they've got $50,000 down but can't get qualified for a loan and want to do a seller finance? Yeah, on the buy side. I've got one right now, but it's a retail one because it's like a guy couldn't sell his house he was listed at $730,000 if it's a really nice house, right? But he couldn't sell it because, as you know, that part of the market isn't moving. And I went to him. They came as like a lead to us. I'm like, hey, there's no way I can flip this. But what I can do is if you sell it on seller finance, I can basically go wrap it to somebody else. So that's the one I brought up to you, basically. So now he was willing to be like, hey, I'll take $25,000 now. I'll take he just wanted like a 3-year balloon no, I think he did 5-year. He did a 60-month balloon, and I'm assuming his mortgage, and his mortgage is like $2,500 a month on it, I think. So now I'm trying to go find that end buyer who has at least $50,000 down, because that's the way I think I told you. The way I'm going to do it is because he had an agent, and they got all flustered, and we didn't didn't get communicated well. But anyway, the way I tied in the agent is like, hey, all right, let's go find our end buyer who could put at least 50,000 down. Then I can get paid 10, the agent can get paid another 10 to 15, and then my seller gets his 25 down he wants. And then they take over the payment. And I was actually gonna maybe build it into where I make a little bit on the payment, because I only have to make a payment of $2,500 a month, but I mean, people at that price point could probably afford like $3,500 or something. So I could make the delta on that every month. But anyway, I've seen a couple in Cheyenne, so I'll keep you in mind. Yeah. Anyway, I'm like, hey, I don't know what to do. What do you think at this point? And I just told him, I'm like, hey, we could, but your house won't sell, and I think it will sell if we do these terms. So I basically novated it with that guy. I'm like, hey, go ahead and still list it and see if we can find a buyer based on those terms. Yeah, and then they'll just do whatever. And that's what I told them. I'm like, if we get $75,000 down, this can work. But if we get 50,000, you guys have got to adjust your commission to make it work.
Back to the apartment complex, you said it was a 63 unit, but there was actually like 70 something units.
Yeah.
What happened to those other units? Why weren't they included in the deal?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's an HOA, so they're condos. So it's a 72 unit condominium, and we own 63 of the 72 condos. So we manage the HOA effectively because we have the majority. And that's why we're actually looking to buy back. I'd like to buy back a couple of them. But I don't know, it's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I'll report back in a year or two if it was good, but I think it could be super effective because I've got 2 exit strategies. Like I could piecemeal these off, and especially if I get everything up to $1,200 a month of rent, like I feel like there'd be investors all day that would buy it for $100K, get $1,200 a month. Cat, you're hitting the 1%, right? So we could piecemeal them all off or group them all together. We'll just see how much of an animal. I mean, I'm just gonna have to manage an HOA, which we've never done. We did our first HOA meeting last night. Yeah, only 2 people. 2 people showed up. I thought I was gonna be the only one. 2 out of the 9. There's 9 different owners. This is the thing, Derek. Those guys had no meeting. Yeah, we do. Yeah, so obviously we have control. So, but they've got like no meeting minutes. There was like no documentation for this HOA. At least there was a bank account they were paying people out of, but.
Can I ask, is there a treasurer or like what's the structure?
No, it's so loose. Like that's where it's one of the other things on our list is, and the last ownership just never got to cleaning it up or even creating some sort of system. I mean, a couple of years ago, they got sued because, there was no accounting, and they're basically like all the money they were paying into that HOA was going to who knows where. So that's what I would actually love to solve the problem, but it's just gonna be a tedious thing to solve.